All right, well, welcome everybody. This is Dr. Francine Gaillour with the Physician Coaching Institute. I'm the executive director, and I'm very excited to welcome Sue MacLellan-Tobert, who is one of our PCI instructors, and she's also an experienced coach and also a consultant to healthcare systems that are starting an internal coaching program. And over the next hour or so, we're going to talk about internal coaching programs, what you need to think about. I'm going to ask Sue to share some of her insights. I'll share some of my thoughts based on what I've learned from many of our grads over the years. So Sue, though, I want to have you introduce yourself, say a little bit about your journey to become, I think, such a valuable resource when it comes to our grads and our students starting a internal coaching program.
Thank you, Francine. It's delightful to chat about this topic, which is something I'm passionate about. So I trained as a pediatric cardiologist many, many years ago. And then in 2018, had the opportunity to be a student with you through PCI.
Yay!
And three of us took that training at that time. We also simultaneously developed an internal coaching program at the institution where we work. And there were many learnings around that whole experience. And our program now is in its fifth year of successfully serving our colleagues with coaching services. And I think some of our conversation today will be about some of the learnings around all of that. Challenges too, right? There's never not any speed bumps. So yeah.
Yeah, well, it's wonderful for us. I'm looking forward to our conversation. We're going to do this all in one take. So if we have little technical glitches or gaps here and there, just forgive us. I also want to mention that Sue, in addition to her coaching and her clinical work and her leadership work and her work being an instructor for PCI, also serves as a consultant, a private consultant for health systems that want a little more in-depth assistance in developing their coaching programs. So I'm going to pull up a slide that's going to show what we want to cover today. And so I'm going to just share my screen real quick. So this is what we want to cover. I'm going to show this, and it's also going to be on the finished product. You'll see this topic outline. But our objective, let me just kind of reiterate what our objective is. We know that many of our students and some of our grads are developing internal coaching programs. It might be that you're the only one who's going to be the internal coach. You might have a cadre of coaches already, but we wanted to share some tips and some insights based on Sue's experience, based on my experience in having actually coached, consultant, mentored many of our students and grads who are developing internal coaching programs. So we want to cover some very important, one of the most important is to make sure you have an executive sponsor. What does that mean? Communicating and educating internally, particularly for your stakeholders, and your stakeholders are more people than you think. How do you plan for your coaching launch phase? What do you want to have in place? Not only number of coaches, but access, the number of clients in each phase. How do you handle confidentiality? How do you deliver the coaching? Particularly, I would say almost 100% of our students who are going to be doing internal coaching, they also are doing clinical or leadership duty. So how do you deliver this vis-a-vis everything else you're doing? And how do you monitor in the different phases? And then we want to get into some of the nitty-gritty of a business proposal, because more than likely your organization has asked you to put together the business case for this, even if they are sponsoring it, even if they're enthusiastic. We want to touch on what goes into a business proposal. And then finally, we'll finish off talking about pitfalls, what to be aware of. So, Sue, that is the plan for today. Are you ready for this?
Yep, let's dive in.
Okay. And again, I'm going to take this slide down so you'll get to see us, but you'll have this this outline. If you're watching the video either on YouTube or you're watching on the PCI website, you'll have this outline in front of you. We have it in front of us as well. All right, so Sue, let's start talking about involving an executive sponsor. What does that mean? What does a sponsor mean anyway?
Well, great question. I think there's a little story I could share around what
Yeah.
one type of executive sponsor might look like. So basically what we're talking about here is how to get your administrators, your leadership on board with the idea of developing an internal coaching program. Now, sometimes leadership will come to like-minded individuals and invite you to participate. Maybe that's how you've already landed in the Physician Coaching Institute training, is that you've been chosen to go forward and get this learning and training. But no matter, usually the leadership is functioning with maybe what is a good idea, but doesn't have all the details. And so it's kind of your job then to market the program to the leaders, to engage them in further conversation, and to kind of teach or enlighten them about what might be potential or what potential exists around developing an internal coaching program. And so I remember when we went through this with our wellness committee back in 2017, actually, we had come together as a group and there were lots of ideas. How can we contribute to the well-being of our clinicians? We had some burnout data internally we looked at, and we were kind of scratching our heads. Gosh, how might this, what can we do to help the well-being of our providers? And on a whim, I just had kind of stumbled across physician coaching and thought that, wow, there's maybe more here, but I need to investigate it. So I went and did a fundamentals course through a different organization than PCI, and came back really excited and jazzed up about coaching. And then it was really a matter of how to engage the leadership. And so you want to share the excitement you have around coaching with leadership. You might want to even give them a little sample of what coaching is like, share the literature that's out there. Certainly, we know that there's lots of proof that coaching is beneficial. We can look at the Mayo data, the Stanford data. I mean, there's just a plethora of information out there. But you want to kind of take your coaching experience and excitement around that and share it with the leadership. Now, it's one thing to get their engagement, but dollars are usually needed and time is needed as well, right?
Exactly.
And so
Exactly.
what does sponsorship mean? Now, I am aware of institutions where perhaps the organization tapped into their medical foundation for funding and support. There are outside grants available as well. So there's lots of creative ways to look at this, but that would be part of the conversation you're going to have with your sponsorship. How do we, if we're going to do this, how do we fund it?
Absolutely. You know, and as you're talking, one of the things that I'm thinking about is your organization. You actually had, you know, initially 3 individuals. Your organization was thinking, I thought, you know, pretty progressive and big about coaching. There are a lot of our students and grads who have maybe they have their organization have agreed only to sponsor their training.
Right.
And that's it. And they're often like, okay, you finish your training now. If you want to coach, it has to be on your own time. And it's really important to think ahead, even before you start the training, about how are you going to do your internal coaching if you're just 1 or 2 people? How can you carve out that time so it does become a portion of your FTE, so that you're not doing this on your spare time. And so a couple of things to share, that I have resources for our students. Just need to email me, and we'll also post it on the page where this video is going to be posted. I created a PowerPoint slide set. It's a template on how to pitch internal coaching to your health system, that walks through some of the topics that Sue mentioned, like what's the data that we have internally in our organization. If you have data that would support us starting a coaching program. So it might be, burnout scores. It might be something else. It might be engagement scores. Then it shares the data on the value of coaching. And so anyway, it's a PowerPoint template that many of our students have used to get dollars sponsorship, to get a pilot off the ground and get FTE coverage for that.
As you're sharing that, Francine, a couple things come to mind. One is you might have a leadership sponsor, but then become aware of what else is available in the institution, because you don't want to reinvent the wheel. And so I'm thinking we have for instance, a section on talent and leadership. Connecting with individuals like that, then we were able to say, gosh, there's talent and leadership training for managers, well, but not so much for clinicians.
Good point.
And, then that's expanded as well. So, and how does coaching tie into that? And then the other thing is, once you have your sponsor identified, you have them as your ally, you want to continue to connect with them. So making your learnings known to them keeps them excited about staying on board and engaged. Definitely.
Absolutely. And that's a good lead into our next topic on our overview, communication, which is so critical. So we're talking about communicating and educating internal stakeholders. So let's talk about that. Who are the internal stakeholders first of all, and then let's talk about what's important to communicate.
Right, right. So what comes to mind is certainly leadership, but then your target audience, right? So that is going to potentially or eventually end up being clinicians, providers, whoever you decide you're going to coach. But then there's usually management layers in there in between who, for instance, let's say you have uh, a department that's particularly challenged by burnout and fatigue. Well, those managers of that department are going to know a lot about what's going on. So educating them about the coming options for coaching and for support for their providers is going to be important. And so, for instance, we targeted early on, before the program officially launched, we targeted department chairs because they're working one-on-one with their providers. They know the temperature of the department, what's working well, what isn't, and what opportunities might exist for improving clinician well-being. And so making them aware that this is coming down the road then invites them into staying kind of excited and anticipating this. However, I'm going to just caution here, one of the challenges you might face is leading those stakeholders to a complete and accurate understanding of what coaching is. And that might mean breaking down some stigma around coaching, sharing that, this isn't therapy, this isn't going to be used punitively. So your work might become more obvious as you begin to engage. Hey, do you know what coaching is? We're thinking of offering this service. It's coming down the line in a few months. And have you ever been coached, or what might it look like to offer this within your department, for instance? So asking some of those questions so you gain a better understanding too of what your stakeholders know.
Absolutely. And so just to kind of summarize, you mentioned, of course, the stakeholders would be your leadership team, department chairs, the HR executives, because they often are bringing in coaches from outside and maybe for a whole different purpose. And of course the individuals, the staff, the clinical staff that you're intending to coach, they are all stakeholders as well. And you also mentioned some of the points that you want to communicate is what is coaching, what is it not, how is coaching different than other modalities that they're used to, such as mental health therapy. In a lot of organizations, the word coaching sounds punitive. It's because it's used in a punitive way. And so if you're in one of those organizations that's using the word coaching in a way that sounds punitive, you got a little extra work ahead of you in terms of educating. And what I love about what you all did in your organization, I think you did such a fabulous job of communicating through all your little brochures and everything you all created, I call it marketing collateral, because that's what it is.
Right.
It really paints coaching in the light that is attractive and compelling, using words around developing your potential and around communication and collegiality. Those are
Mhm.
all aspirational type of words, aspirational communication, that should be a part of your communication. It's about what you can achieve with coaching, what's in it, what goodies are in it for you. And
Right.
it's a very positive, all your communication is very positive, and I think it's a real good model for how you make coaching inviting for
Mhm.
individuals, because that's what it is.
Yeah. Yeah, there's multiple different ways you want to kind of reach out to your target audience and your stakeholders, and staying in that positive space is really important. Let me just speak to HR for a minute.
Mm.
Right, HR often,
Yeah.
as part of remedial for maybe
Yeah.
rogue clinicians, offers coaching, right? And so we had some undoing of the concept there that needed to be had. And HR was very supportive of our program because, in fact, I think in the end, we have individuals coming for coaching where they want to be more proactive about maybe some challenges they're seeing in their careers, and their work life, and it's ahead of HR having to become involved. So I think HR began to see the benefit we were to the system, and we also too connected with EAP because we wanted to make certain and clear in our communications that we weren't uh, kind of stepping on their toes at all. We were not offering therapy. We're forward moving. We're looking into the future. We're trying to help individuals find their ideal self, reach their goals. And so the employee assistance program is an important individual or important
Mhm.
group to make aware of what you're offering and building. Definitely.
Yeah, great. Thanks for elaborating on that.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about planning for the coaching launch phase.
Mhm.
So, let's say we have a couple of coaches that are going to be, in the same organization, finishing our program, and they're going to be launching the coaching program.
Mhm.
What is the launch phase? How do they know when they're ready to launch? What should they have in place?
Well, this makes me chuckle because our mantra used to be, "If we build it, will they come?" Right? And
Mhm.
you assured us again and again, people will show up for coaching, and indeed they did. But we kind of had this self-doubt, I guess. I don't know if it's like it's not quite like imposter syndrome, but we were kind of wondering, are we doing this right, and how's it going to unfold? But there's lots of moving parts, so don't be overwhelmed by the lots of moving parts because you have your leadership you're accountable to. You want to get the word out on the street and talk to those stakeholders. You want to do some work with marketing. How are you going to market this to the clinicians, the providers? Whether that's through internal communications, emails. We happen to work with IT and develop a web page that clinicians then had access to. How do you want to do your booking system? Um, who's going to be available when? If you have FTE allotted to do this, how's that's going to fit into your regular clinic schedule? So there were lots of moving parts. But I think this is where working with, we ended up working with an individual in HR who could kind of be the program director for this
Mm,
temporary piece of time,
great
who
idea.
can kind of guide the steps. So you may or may not have the ability to have someone lead you on that journey. But I think use your organizational skills, take your time. If you set a launch date and it's not looking like it's going to happen, that's okay too. All of this is good in the end. Uh, and we ended up doing what was called a soft launch. So we didn't suddenly open the doors and say all comers come to coaching. We targeted a few departments and we informed the department chairs that they could, encourage their providers to come to us. And then we started slowly with adding in a newsletter, handing out a brochure, connecting with new clinicians at their orientation, meeting with the residents. All of that unfolded over about a year and a half. And in fact, as you try those points of contact and those points of networking, we knew that, hey, we want to meet with every new resident group that comes in. We want to be at every orientation for new clinicians. And so then we could see how our marketing process was going to unfold long term. And we do that. It's now part of the program. Here we come into June. What are we going to do? Here we come into September. What are we going to do? And we have little mini 10-minute presentations. Very simple to do once you kind of have one under your belt. So, yeah.
Yeah, good points. In terms of what other health systems have done, it's going to be very important to have a sense for what do you think your capacity is going to be for
Right.
coaching. If you're just one or two internal coaches and you have, zero point 0.1 FTE, some of that FTE is going to be just on I would say the administrative parts of coaching, might be, on communication early on, might be setting up some meetings with department chairs. But in terms of the actual coaching clients that you're going to be able to take on, it's something you do want to think about ahead of time. What's going to be our capacity for the first 6 months? What might our capacity be for the next 6 months? Another, just share a tip from an organization who, I think they had like 5 coaches who trained with us through a couple of cohorts.
Okay.
And I thought they had a very interesting approach to the vetting clients. And I say vet because they had potential clients actually apply for the opportunity to be a client. Again, they did not ask these individuals to reveal anything in terms of what they want to be coached on or anything. They really maintained confidentiality, but they wanted to ensure that they had some diversity, from different departments. They wanted diversity in terms of, women or people of color. They wanted to have that first phase of clients not be, they wanted to at least to see if they could do something that would ensure some diversity. And they also knew that they were going to have a ramp up as they trained more people. They were going to be able to coach X number of people in the first 6 months, a few more in the next 6 months. So they spent quite a bit of time, and they also did have a program manager of sorts who assisted them in putting together a project plan for this. And I would say that was probably one of the most, that I'm aware of, most well planned. But again, they were a bigger organization, more number of coaches. Most of our students and our grads are going to be 1, 2, or 3 coaches who are going to try to do this while they're also doing their clinical work, but still spending some time thinking through what's going to be your first phase. We call the launch phase. What's your capacity? What's your capacity for the next phase? And being real, careful that you're not burning yourself out as coach.
Well, that's a really good point, right? Here we are as coaches, and we've come into this because we love the benefits of coaching, and we get a lot out of it ourselves. But you're right, we don't
Yeah.
want to suddenly burn ourselves out. Absolutely. The other thing that comes to mind too is, well, how do you know capacity, right? So I searched long and hard for
Yeah.
data around that. Like, what is a full-time coach? How many clients do they have? And so,
It's a
and then
range.
we kind of had to figure that out on our own, right? And so, where we ended up landing is if we do an hour coaching session and I have 4 hours of coach time, including administration, available in a week, I might end up having 2 or 3 clients a week, but generally there's about an hour of other logistical stuff or planning for future groups and things that come in. So you don't want to overbook yourself right out of the starting gate at all. Um,
Mhm.
and then I think the other thing too is what other duties do you have? So I'm aware of individuals who have been assigned the role of the chief wellness officer and they're a coach, or they're a leader in the organization with administrative duties and they're a coach. And so, how do you divide that up? But you also kind of have to keep your duties and your roles a little separated,
Definitely.
and be mindful of that. That
Mhm.
uh, you're not being a leader and a coach at the same time can simultaneously be challenging. So, yeah, being aware of your other roles that you have are very important.
Absolutely. Um, let's cover one more thing in the launch phase in terms of what to deliver, and this will kind of go into the next. You mentioned, I think you're offering one-on-one coaching. It may be in a kind of, I call it coaching hours. You know, they can have one
Mhm.
session, or we call it coaching arc, maybe 6 sessions over 2 or 3 months. Maybe coaching of a group. I know you guys did coaching of the groups. Don't know if you did it initially, but
Mhm.
but what are your thoughts on what in the launch phase, the first phase, that what makes sense to offer to the staff, to the clinical staff when you're
Mhm.
first launching?
Yeah. Well, a couple things. Because we were a team, we chose to work together to try to, we call it triaging the inquiries, but I
Mhm.
don't know if that's the best term, but basically, one of us was assigned to look at incoming requests for coaching. And then on our webpage, we'd set up each of us sort of sharing what our philosophies were. So a client would have the ability to choose which coach they might think they're going to connect with best. And then we'd do a 30-minute chat. Why are you interested in coming to coaching? And tell them a little bit about the coaching process, answer any questions. And so I very often now still do that, but sometimes I'll just offer it to the client. Do you want to have a 20 to 30-minute connect to get to know each other? Or do you wanna just dive right in? And many times they'll say, "I'm happy just to dive right in. I just wanna get
Uh-huh.
going into the coaching part of it." So I found
Mhm.
offering the client a choice was a perfectly fine thing to do, but offering a
Mhm.
complimentary call so they get to know you is perfectly fine too. Um,
Mhm.
and sometimes the question comes up, well, what if it's somebody that you work with or somebody within your department?
Mhm.
And that's a challenge. You may want to say, gosh, I'm going to recommend you go to another coach because maybe we're facing the same issues within the department together or the same communication challenges, et cetera. But if they're coming and saying, hey, I want to coach for fulfillment and I want to get ready for this leadership position, that's kind of a different topic where, gosh, I might coach that person within my department. So that little 20 to 30-minute conversation at the beginning can really also help you as a coach decide if this is the best client fit for you too. And just be real transparent about it that, gosh, I think I'm going to recommend in this situation you work with, or I'd be happy to provide you with some leadership coaching as you get into this new space. So, um, that's where your intuition comes in, I think, too,
Mhm.
Francine, is you gotta,
Yeah,
use your intuition as to thinking if this is a good
yeah,
fit for the client.
yeah. And being flexible too. I know that some of our, I think say most of our grads who are doing internal coaching, they are going to be available if somebody wants just a one coaching session. Hey, I call it just in time coaching. Can I have a
Mhm.
coaching session tomorrow?
Right.
And they also offer a kind of semi-structured, we call them short arc programs, that it
Mm.
might be 6 sessions over 3 months. Most of the time, the internal coaches are not offering real long coaching programs because they don't have enough resources to do a 6-month program. But
Right.
um, but they do. What they have found is that the physicians and advanced practice providers do like the opportunity to have a professional development arc, that
Mhm.
like a 6 session, starting off with a client kickoff, maybe values clarification exercises, maybe the disc. So doing something like that um,
Mhm.
is really worthwhile, and always being kind of flexible, being available for a one-time coaching session or two coaching sessions, so that the in some ways, particularly as you've been doing this as long as your team has been doing it, I think probably the physicians kind of get a sense for what they might be able to
Mhm.
what kind of opportunity they have with coaching.
Right. Well, and sometimes depending on what that introductory conversation brings forward, I might say to somebody,
Mm-hmm.
God, gosh, this sounds more along the lines of communication. Maybe we'll meet 2 or 3 times and touch on a couple different things. And I'd pull the disc in potentially, offer that to
Yeah,
them, and then find, okay, gosh, yep, this is good, one and done. Now,
yeah.
sometimes clients come back a year later. Hey, I need a tune up or a
Mm-hmm.
refresher. Perfect.
Yeah.
We call even 20-minute sessions that sometimes you'll get a message from a client, gosh, do you have a few minutes before I go into this meeting? We call those laser coaching sessions. Sure.
Uh-huh.
And we really try our hardest to make it work. And it's hard because sometimes we're in the middle of our clinic day. So where most of our client time lands for meeting with clients is between 7 and 9 in the morning, at noon, and then from 4 till 6, because it's hard and when you got a full patient schedule. And so that's really something that was, I think, challenging for us to figure out. Um, Even though I have 4 hours a week and I have time set aside on my schedule, it doesn't always land in that point in time. But our
Mhm.
administration understands if we're working before and after clinic, and that's a personal choice you have to make as a coach. Do you want to do it that way? Or if you're working a half hour through your lunch hour coaching, you're kind of, that's your own time, but you have your FTE set aside. It all comes out in the wash, is my belief. There's a whole bunch of different ways you could try and slice and
Yeah.
dice it, but that's how we landed with
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And we did
I
do a
think
little internal study. Let me just add this. We did an
oh
internal
yeah.
study, and most of our individual clients, the average engagement with a coach was 9.3 months, with the
Oh,
average of one coaching session a month. So, I mean, there's a little bit of data there that gives you an idea.
that's right. Yeah. I mean, that's pretty, that's a lot of coaching, really, if that's the average. That's a lot
Yeah.
of coaching. Yeah. I wanted to just mention also that some of our internal coaches, when I say our grads, are in the academic world
Mhm.
and maybe coaching medical students, residents, maybe faculty. And what I have gleaned so far is that they do like to offer again, an arc. And they often, like with medical students or with residents, will do it in a group form. And well, we talk about coaching the group in the PCI program, but offering them things like values clarification exercises, strengths articulation, particularly for the younger physicians who really may not have a lot of self-awareness yet about what are my natural strengths, what are my core values, doing the disc so they have a sense for what are my communication preferences. So kind of giving them that I call it front loading some self-awareness when they're
Right.
young. So those are some semi-structured program approaches that some of the academic coaches who have gone through our program, because in academics, the mentoring process is such a prominent modality.
Mhm.
But yet there's a lot of decisions that young physicians have to make. Where am I going to do my residency? Do I want to move to this city? There's a lot of decision making that really falls on them. And so having some awareness about my core values, my strengths, what's important to me really does facilitate their decision making, which is completely a separate realm than clinical knowledge that they're going to be getting from their mentor.
Mhm. I really appreciate what you're sharing. And so we also do we offer that type of group experience for our residents. It's not mandatory. So one of the decisions that comes up is, do you try to fit it in with the family practice mandatory learning that they have or not? Or with the surgical learning or not? And so that's just hard because they're so busy. And they're in this narrow lane of drinking from that fire hose of medical
Yeah.
knowledge. Who has time for self-care and self-compassion, right? So we really that was a really important learning for us, is that we
Yeah.
offer it and whoever's available can show up. They may not make
Uh-huh.
6 sessions of the whole program that we offer, but we're always convinced that whoever is there at the moment needed to be there, and then hold it lightly otherwise, right? Because making it mandatory is really a challenge for the trainees. Yet we know that they're in this pre-contemplative phase where growing self-awareness is not at the top list of their things to do. But
Mhm.
I like the term front loading that you used. It would be great if we could do that and had the time to do it. And
Yeah.
they had the energy. Yeah, amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's I think some of our grads have found some, your bud keeps popping out, found some creative ways to use, like, for example, the intention statement. One of our grads used the intention statement for the residents because they are all going to be, interviewing for their, if they're not going on to fellowship, they're going to be interviewing for their first like real job right afterwards. And it was a way for them to structure like I've always called it the walking, talking, calling card, the business card. So it was a way for them to start articulating, who they are in a way that's authentic and powerful. So I thought that was very clever that this one of our coaches used that for that purpose. Because then for the residents, okay, there is something in there for them, right?
Right. Well, and okay, this popped into my mind about marketing. So
Yeah.
let's say you have an engaged group of residents who really enjoy whatever you shared with them in the coaching topics. Well, then they are your next best set of marketers to share with the next
Oh,
group,
yeah,
right?
that's
And
right.
so we've learned that. In fact, we had one resident for 3 years. He went through the program that we were offering, and he's a huge advocate for just clinician wellness. Well, of course, residents are going to listen to him, and that kind of boosts their confidence and maybe stepping outside their comfort zone and attending a group, right? So it's use those people that have gone through
Absolutely.
if they're open to
Absolutely.
sharing.
Yeah, they'll be the influencers.
Absolute influencers. That's right. That's the new term now.
Right. So we're talking about delivering coaching. So this is kind of again moving into our next topic is delivering, monitoring, and managing. So what do we want to monitor, and how do we assess progress early versus later? How do we know how we're doing as internal coaches, and when is it time to scale up?
Right. Yeah. Well, when I think about what to monitor, way early on, we had this conversation with our wellness team. Well, gosh, this ought to resolve some burnout, and we can just follow our burnout numbers, and maybe clinician retention will improve. And in fact, those aren't the numbers that are the most helpful to follow, because, well, first of all, burnout is kind of nebulous. You may only have one little feature of burnout, and maybe you're not ready for coaching. So, or maybe you get coaching and you realize actually this institution doesn't align with my values, so I'm going to leave, right? That person's benefited from coaching, but the organization may not have in the end and now has to invest in recruiting. So, deciding what to monitor too, not only can be challenging, uh, and your leaders may demand it. So maybe your coaching is going to start out as a pilot program. Show us and prove to us that this actually works. Well, we already know the literature out there is that it works. But you want to look at more impactful and transformative type experiences for the individuals if you're going to monitor your coaching. So you might want to start out with something simple like the Harvard Wellness Scale, or looking at just a few short questions at the beginning of coaching and then doing an evaluation after, where what's shifted for the client. And also then too, get their feedback on the program, what worked and what didn't work. Things like the timing of when I could access my coach, or the type of topics that we were talking about, or, even as much as was my coach a good listener, and any feedback specifically, because we should be receiving that feedback about our style as well. So there is lots to monitor. And we actually didn't do a full client survey until last year, 4 years into it, when we felt we'd built up a substantial number of individual clients. And what popped out there was that my communication skills improved, my conflict resolution skills improved. I learned how to be a better leader. So take some time to figure out what's important within your workplace culture that you want to monitor, but it's not necessarily burnout scores.
Yeah. Thanks, Sue. And we have a whole module where we talk about outcomes and metrics. So we typically cover it at the capstone. So I'm not going to go into it here, but there's some quantitative things that you can look at, like burnout scores. There's also some, job engagement scores. There's the well-being index, which is nice. And then there are some qualitative, just questions you can ask to assess how valuable the coaching was for them, in terms of either behaviors or awareness. At a minimum, you do want to just track also how many people are taking advantage of coaching. What's the number of people that are being coached, and like something that you guys did, how many sessions have they done over a year's time?
Right.
So and there's no right or wrong. And honestly, for everyone here is trailblazing in that area. And it's we even talked about this at one of our webinars the other day. Even using a metric like retention may not be as valuable, because some people decide, hey, you know what, this organization is not for me, or
Right.
maybe medicine is not for me,
Right.
but yet they are more fulfilled, they're happier. And so retention is not necessarily going to be like a key metric. So you want to look at what is it that we're trying to achieve with our coaching program, and how might we assess that, with qualitative questions
Mhm.
initially.
Yeah, and I would say at
Yeah.
minimum, as a coach, what you should be tracking is your numbers. So, and there's a couple reasons for that. One is you want to make certain that if you're given FTE or a certain amount of time to coach, that you're not doing too much, right? You want to
Mm,
keep it within the realm and scope of what you've been given time to do. And if you ever want to go on to get an ICF credential, keeping track of your internal clients is very, very
yes.
important. You need those numbers. So that's at minimum, and then
Mhm.
consider offering an evaluation to the client at the end of their coaching time with you, so you have a little bit of an
Mhm.
idea of how that went for them at minimum.
Yeah, yeah. And we have, when we talk about outcomes, it's in the big binder. We have some examples of kinds of questions you can ask of your client, kind of before and after the coaching engagement. So let's talk about the business proposal, because it sounds like we're working backwards, but a lot of our grads are going to be expected to come up with not just a PowerPoint, 8 PowerPoint slides, but what is a little more formal business proposal. And we outlined a few things to put in there. So why don't we touch on each one of these real quick? And then I think what I do, before we do that, let me see if I can uh, just remind us real quick what those points are. I'll just put this up for just a
Perfect.
second. Yeah, we're talking about right here, mission and vision, what's in scope, what's out of scope, what will the program offer, how to promote, pilot or not, measuring outcomes. Okay, well, that's what I want you to touch on.
Yeah. Well,
Go
and we've
ahead, Sid.
hinted at a few of these topics already. I think when you look at business proposal, it's kind of like you're developing this internal coaching business within your institution. And, how many of us come with lots of entrepreneurial experience? Not many. And then the term I heard recently was really what we are when we're doing internal coaching and developing a business proposal like this is we're intrapreneurs, not entrepreneurs. I don't know if that's the right term or not, but how do you, I mean, this is like a startup, right? And so let's say you've gotten your sponsorship, you've engaged your allies and your stakeholders. Let's say you even have some funding. And most coaching programs and wellness programs across the country are terribly underfunded. So trying to figure out a budget will be important as time goes on. But what I would recommend, and we started with this, and it was really the birth of the creativity, was developing your mission and vision statement to begin with. What do you want to do, and why do you want to do it? And many times, the organizations already have built-in mission, vision, values. So the coaching program ought to align with what the more general organizational mission, vision, values are. But is there anything there that you would tweak as that coach entrepreneur internally here, or as the team
Mhm.
internally? And so we chose to align our mission and vision statements pretty much with the organizational statements, but made it more personal to coaching. We really wanted to touch the lives of those that we were connecting with at a deeper level. So it was transformational for the client. So consider doing that. And there's lots of different ways that you can, and resources you can tap into for how to write a mission and vision statement. And then as you begin to form the program, oh, pardon me, you want to explore, why am I doing this? And what do I need resource wise? Where do I want to land with my programs? And so that what's in scope and out of scope has to do
Mm-hmm.
with what you want to
Mm-hmm.
facilitate. Is this about fulfillment, career development, sort of maybe it's more of a niche coaching that you're going to focus on? And what's out of scope, maybe you're going to draw the line in the sand and say none of this will be remedial, which is what we did. People do not get assigned to our coaching program. That was really an important point for leadership,
Mm-hmm.
HR, and EAP
Absolutely.
to know. And
Mm-hmm.
that's how we continue to keep away that idea that this is for fixing, right? We're not here to fix, we're
Mm-hmm.
here to move forward. And so that's where the in scope and out of scope comes. And what are you going to offer? You might start out offering individual sessions and then realize, hey, I do have a little bit of wiggle room here, and there's a group coming forward. One of our mottos was we're going to say yes to everything, but not in a way that suddenly we're flooded with work. We want to
Mm-hmm.
be open and inviting, though. And I think that's a marketing tactic, you could say, that you want to invite curiosity from clients and groups wondering about your group. And you want to say, yes, maybe I can't do the whole 10-week program, but we could offer something.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Promotion is important, and your marketing team internally will have some ideas for you, and hopefully you can tap into them as a resource. We just started with a simple brochure and a 10-minute slideshow, and continued to use that over the years.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't have to be complex. And again, I come back to pilot or not was one of the questions. We already know that coaching works and it sticks with people and it helps them even learn how to self-coach and grow in their
Mm-hmm.
own awareness and management over time. So we shouldn't have to prove that again, although every
Mm-hmm.
leadership team is different on what they require.
Yeah.
Uh,
In
yeah.
fact, uh, I've had a little bit of, I won't say pushback, but I mentioned this PowerPoint that I created to help some of our students, pitch a coaching program. And but we try not to use the word pilot, because you're right. This is not about proof that coaching works. The pilot is more around looking at the mechanics of how you're going to develop it or deliver it in your organization. How many clients, what are your hours, access. It's not about does coaching work, it's how is coaching going to
Right,
work for us in this organization. So
right.
that the pilot is about that.
Right. And how can you expand from there then? But then again, how
Mm-hmm.
long are you considering it a pilot versus when are
Mm-hmm.
you fully in? So,
Yeah, right.
yeah,
Yeah. But
right.
using the word pilot is sometimes reassuring to executive sponsors that or you can
True.
call it
Right.
phase one, just call it phase one or
Phase on.
launch phase.
Right.
Phase one.
That's right.
Um, and I appreciate your thoughts about what's in scope and out of scope, because it's pretty fun to have a vision that's all encompassing, and you got to remember that some things are going to be out of scope. Many things will be out of scope when you in your first phase of launching your coaching program. And I'm thinking of one of our internal coaches. She's just a single person who's got a big vision for what she wants to have happen in her organization. And as I was talking to her about her enrichment project for the capstone, I
Mhm.
mean, we talked about scaling way back. What's the one thing that you think you can do well in the first year of being an internal coach? Focus on that.
And that may be
Uh,
all you want to market to begin with, you know.
yeah, yeah.
Uh, Maybe explore your career goals is all that niche you're gonna coach on in the first year if you're a single
Hmm.
coach, and you'll have a cohort that will come forward to explore that with you. And then next phase, right, is it adding more coaches, is it expanding your topics?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. So our last topic is pitfalls. What are a few pitfalls that you want to share? What do you want our coaches to be aware of
Yeah.
that might get them into, if not getting into trouble, that might slow them down
Right.
in their launching.
Right. So all of this takes people power. And so if you're kind of like the single person doing this, be patient with yourself, I would say, because you may
Mhm.
have several meetings and it looks like things are going ahead. And then, as we know, the internal wheel of administration turns slowly and things might not come to fruition as clearly. So stay creative and look at other avenues and ways you can network in the meantime if you're waiting for a response or an approval. Um, Sometimes people will say, well, how can you coach internally if you know these people, right? And I think what you come out of PCI with is a really good understanding not only of the ICF core competencies, but the ethics. And so making certain that you are following that code of ethics, that if you kind of get a funny feeling that there might be a conflict of interest or there might be something here that's going to be an ethical dilemma, it's okay to push pause. I like to say to people, everything we do is experimental, and it's okay to not kind of get on a fast hamster wheel waiting for the outcome. It's okay to take your time in all of
Yeah.
this. And
Mhm.
ensuring the confidentiality of your program and remaining autonomous from administration, if at all possible, is important, because that can be one of the ethical dilemmas that comes up. The leader says, gosh, I know Dr. So and so is coming to you for coaching. What can you tell me? Right? Um, Poof, that's kind of like a little pitfall. And I have a standard sentence that I say. I can neither confirm or not deny that I'm
Yeah.
coaching Dr. So and so. Won't have any more of
Mhm.
this conversation. So be prepared. Preparing in advance for some of the challenges, I think, is helpful. Um,
Mhm.
there's one other observation I want to share, because I do also do coaching outside of Gunderson, just um, as a private coaching business. And it is really important that that is not with any of the people within the footprint of the
Yeah,
institution where I'm working, right? That there's
makes
conflict
sense.
of interest there, really important. Um, but the clients that I do have who are paying clients are really invested in the programs. Whereas our observation is by our internal team, if you set up a 3 or 6 month coaching arc with a client internally, but they're getting this free from our institution, there's no payment that they have to do. They may
Mhm.
or may not show up. And that's okay.
Mhm.
We're not holding any judgment against any of our colleagues or our
Mhm.
clients. It is what it is. So,
Mhm.
we can that judging mentality can easily come on board. Be aware of that
Mhm.
and
Mm.
release
Good
it.
point.
That you're there to serve, and if people show up, great, and if they don't, that's okay too.
Yeah. Yeah, because sometimes they get busy and it's not about um, that they don't want to be coached, but some stuff happens with physicians.
Right, right.
And I remember when I was, I never ever would get upset, or some coaches I hear, I don't know of any who actually do this, who will go ahead and assess a fee if a client doesn't show up for a coaching session. But I thought, physicians are busy, and it's extremely rare,
Mhm.
very rare, that any physician ever, I think, abused the relationship, of not showing up, not communicating. That's so unusual.
Yeah. Well, and
Yeah.
don't take it personally if they don't show up, would
Yeah.
be the piece
Yeah,
of
that's the
advice I
other
would
one.
have, right?
Right,
Is that
right.
there's a
Yeah.
tendency that we're going to think it's us. Actually, it's not. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Right. Yeah.
yeah.
Um, and some in terms of, I don't know, I would call these pitfalls when I reflect on our grads who I'm aware of, because we know we like have a lot of grads checking in periodically. And I would say internal coaches, for the most part, everybody launches. You launch to your capacity. If you were 3 or 5 coaches, they eventually launch. And the internal coaches who don't launch, because sometimes they don't, and
Mm,
it's not frequent, but when I look at what might be the factors of them not launching, it
mhm,
does fall into some of the things that we've already talked about. Executive sponsor, the sponsor may have said, yes, we'll go pay for your coach training, but now they're everyone's busy, and um, And it's hard for that individual coach to like, all right, make the case and go drum up, you know what I mean, to get either another sponsor or to have the sponsor agree to some carve out time. Again, it doesn't happen very often, but I did want to mention that some of our grads have been able to do what we call a pay it forward. So
Oh,
they have an arrangement where, okay, you're paying for my coach training. I am going to now have X number of coaching hours or coaching programs that I'm going to deliver over the next 2 years or 1 year. And I'm
oh,
going to do it during my this period of time. So they're, you know, again, it's being a little bit more proactive
mhm.
about kind of
I like that.
forcing yourself in there, you know, at least for a short period of time. So it's a way of paying it back
Mhm.
without an assurance that you'll do something beyond that. But
Right.
anyway, for anybody who's in that boat, you know, call me and we can talk about how you might arrange that.
Mm.
But the other thing I sometimes see is that an internal coach, if they're the only one, um, they may not have the confidence yet. And that's something where I feel like, oh, you know, I want all of our coaches to feel confident that they're ready to coach. So they may take longer. So they're not ready to like put out the shingle and say, okay, I'm in. And so I've seen them take longer to see enough clients so that they develop that confidence. But again, the key is something you said, there's no right or wrong in terms of pace. You launch in a way that you feel comfortable, and particularly for a coach who's the only coach in their organization. They're not like you where they've got 3 or 5 people and you are strategizing, you're doing
Right.
maybe some continuous learning together. um, you know, and so for those solo coaches, it's important to stay plugged in to a community. So it might be your cohort has become a mastermind, or maybe you can join our PCI coaching rounds so that you're practicing your coaching and you're getting, you know, you're part of a group that is still coaching. So you're not out there alone.
Absolutely. Yeah, that connection piece is huge, I think,
Mhm.
and can't be overstated that
Yeah.
continuous networking and reaching out,
Yeah.
don't be shy about that, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else that we either pitfalls or any other lessons learned that you want to share before we conclude?
I would conclude that, building an internal coaching program is highly rewarding if coaching is a passion of
Mm-hmm.
yours,
Mm-hmm.
and to, be gracious and patient with yourself because things move slowly in healthcare anyway, uh, and be willing to reach out to kind of curate and create and put together ideas. And it may not end up in the final form you think, and that's okay too. So that flexibility piece is really important.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, all right. And what's nice about our community, there's so many more coaches who are internal coaches. I think in at least half of every cohort is going to be internal coaches. So it's a nice growing community that can
growing,
tap
yeah.
into each other. And of course, you're a wonderful advisor, a consultant available to our students as well. Um, so we've covered a lot. There's probably more to cover, but we're going to host a Q&A during the capstone, and that's the time to bring questions.
Mhm.
So thank you again, Sue, for being available
Yeah,
today. Thank you
thank
for
you.
sharing your wisdom and insights on behalf of your team. Um, and I will see you in a webinar soon.
Take care, everyone.
Okay.